think Abzan just almost always means mid-range. It's redundant if you want to call a deck something like Abzan mid-range, right?
Oh,
if
yeah.
it's anything else, that's what you would list it.
Yeah, I would say like Abzan Coco, right? But I would never say Abzan mid-range.
Right. Reid Duke is going to start us off with an Inquisition of Kozilek here. Get a look at Fabiano's hand. 7 cards, Serum Visions, ×2, Terminus, Path to Exile, Basic Plains, Field of Ruin, and Flooded Strand are the holdings.
Yep, a hand that could really go anywhere with those Serum Visions. Reid taking the Path to Exile, stripping Gerard of that potential point of interaction with his turn 2 creature. Let's see if it's Dark Confidant or if it's something a little bit worse.
Notably, that Terminus in the opening hand, not really where you want them, though Fabiano is on fully 4 copies. If you're able to stem the initial onslaught, then you eventually do get to 6 mana and can cast that one.
Yeah, hard casting it is definitely solid, and in tough spots once you hit 6 mana, but really you just want to hit it off a miracle in the first 3 to 5 turns of the game, basically to give you a window where you get to play this big removal spell for 1 mana, and then follow it up with a Planeswalker or something like that.
Fabiano starts with that Flooded Strand. He'll crack that for a Hallowed Fountain untapped to 17. Serum Visions is where he'll go.
This game should go long enough that the Azorius control deck should be able to hard cast that Terminus if it gets to that point. But the unbanning of Jace the Mind Sculptor actually unlocked a lot of breathing room for decks that want to play Terminus. Because of that Brainstorm-esque ability, you get to put those Terminus back on top of your deck where they belong.
Turn 2 for Reid Duke. There's Marsh Flats. Here's Godless Shrine. That'll knock him down to 17. See exactly what 2-mana threat he has. There's a range of things. He has a Miser's Grim Flayer in the deck, 3 Scavenging Ooze, Tarmogoyf's Dark Confidants abound, and it is the one of Grim Flayer.
Now, Reid chose to strip Gerard of that Path to Exile specifically because he had a 2-drop creature to play. And in this scenario, he's hoping that this Grim Flayer will connect at least once, maybe more, and find some piece of graveyard-related interaction. Now, whether or not that is Lingering Souls or some other thing, the ability on Grim Flayer is very good once it starts hitting.
Basic Plains is the second land for Fabiano, and there is one of his 3 Relic of Progenitus. He'll go to work on that. Reid will exile his Inquisition of Kozilek from his graveyard. That's going to really do a lot of work in stopping Duke from getting Delirium for that Grim Flayer. Fabiano follows that up with a Serum Visions. Looks like 1 top, 1 bottom for the scry.
Yeah, this Relic of Progenitus could really put a kink in Reid Duke's overall game plan. Shrinks Tarmogoyf, makes show Grim Flayer never really has the ability to hit Delirium. Turns off all the food for Scavenging Ooze. Hitting the graveyard, especially over and over again with Relic of Progenitus, is quite strong against these green-black base strategies.
It's also a pretty interesting element when you're talking about this deck being a 4 Terminus deck. It's another way you can draw a card on your opponent's turn.
Yep, setting that up via Serum Visions or something, and then still having that way to draw a card at instant speed sitting on the table is a big deal.
Turn 3 for Reid Duke. He'll start with an Inquisition of Kozilek. Already knew about that Terminus. Sees Jace the Mind Sculptor, Flooded Strand, Field of Ruin, and the only hit he could take, Timely Reinforcements, discarded for Fabiano.
Yeah, Gerard's hand, not particularly good, but he did just resolve a Serum Vision, so he's got some things to work with. I think the most important thing about Gerard's hand is actually the fact that Jace the Mind Sculptor can reset that Terminus and then allow him to cast it on the following turn. Or, once he hits his 5th mana, he can Jace Brainstorm and then pass the turn, and during Reid Duke's upkeep can crack the Relic of Progenitus, draw a card, and I guess he would need 6 mana to do that, but...
Grim Flayer connects for 2, Fabiano at 15. Duke's going to look at the top 3 cards, decide how many, if any, he wants to put into his graveyard. Remember, there is that active Relic of Progenitus for Fabiano, but he can still stop himself from drawing some things, and looks to be the plan as he puts Nile Spellbomb from the top of the deck into the graveyard, keeps the other 2 on top. Forest is the land for turn. And Scavenging Ooze added to the battlefield. A pair of Grizzly Bears for Reid Duke.
Yeah, now that Relic of Progenitus is online, Reid very afraid of just casting that Lingering Souls from hand, wanting to wait essentially until the Relic is gone, or he has access to 5 mana, where he'll be able to cast and then flashback that Lingering Souls before the Relic of Progenitus can sweep it up.
Flooded Strand for Fabiano. He'll fall to 14. The basic island is found. Didn't have anything for 3 mana last time we got a look at the hand. See exactly what the plan is here. He'll activate Relic of Progenitus. Duke will exile that Marsh Flats. And Detention Sphere picked up. That's going to grab the Grimflayer.
Yeah, that's going to stem the bleeding just a bit, but it doesn't really solve the problem. This other 2/2 from Reid is still applying pressure and really doing effectively the same thing as Grimflayer without the triggered ability. What the Detention Sphere does do, it makes something like Abrupt Decay or Maelstrom Pulse from Reid a little bit better because he has a target to get a creature back if he wants to.
Scavenging Ooze will knock Fabiano to 12, and Dark Confidant added to the battlefield for Duke. That is a very solid pickup.
Yeah, one of the better draws for Reid in this spot. A little low on mana, really just wants to apply more pressure, and Dark Confidant is the best thing to do that here against this Azorius control deck.
Field Runes, the 4th land. Jace the Mind Sculptor cast for Fabiano. Couple choices on what he wants to do with that. One of the very few Planeswalkers with 4 abilities. Do you want to bounce something? Do you want to plus? Do you want to brainstorm? It's tough.
Yeah, Jason Mind Sculptor banned in Modern for a very long time for a good reason. It's very powerful as well as versatile. I would actually love here if Gerard made the high-risk play of plus Jace the Mind Sculptor to 5. The odds of a creature entering the graveyard with Reid still having access to a green mana to eat it and pump the Scavenging Ooze is pretty low, and that would give Gerard a window to untap with a Jace at effectively 1 loyalty, use that Brainstorm ability, and then during Reid's upkeep, pop the Relic and cast that Terminus, getting rid of both of these creatures.
Yeah, that is that more risky play, but if it pays off, he gets to have Jace. You can just do, it looks like Fabiano landed on Brainstorm. This way you know you'll get that Terminus from your hand to the top of your deck, set up a Miracle coming up on the next turn. Though Duke has a very clean answer to your Jace now, just attack with your 2/2 power creatures.
Yeah, 4 mana Brainstorm is not exactly appealing, but when you're in a spot where you get to play a sweeper effect on the following turn for 1 mana, and then follow that up with potentially a number of things. I like Gerard's spot here, though Reid is going to get a trigger off of Dark Confidant before that Terminus goes off, and he's going to be able to clear out that Jason Mind Sculptor via the attack step.
All right, so Fabiano activates Relic. Graveyard just Nile Spellbomb for Duke. Duke will use the Scavenging Ooze, get that Path to Exile out of Fabiano's graveyard. Back on Duke's side, Maelstrom Pulse revealed the Dark Confidant. That's not a bad one. The creatures will come in, knock Jace the Mind Sculptor down. Duke already knew about that Terminus. He's got to figure that's the top card of Fabiano's deck, possibly the second one down, so another creature here wouldn't make sense, but he has a nice one. Liliana of the Veil is the play for the turn.
Second one down wouldn't make a ton of sense because you really want to Terminus right now to make sure that Dark Confidant doesn't get another trigger. If it was one more deep down, he would have to wait until the next turn with that Relic of Progenitus.
Liliana pluses. Fabiano discards Glacial Fortress. Duke discards Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf a little bit weak against Relic of Progenitus.
I agree with that. But that's the thing about these Golgari decks. You have to basically force your opponent to use their Relic of Progenitus or use their Nile Spellbomb. And once that is gone, then you start rebuilding.
Terminus was miracled as the draw set for Fabiano. He's going to use Field of Ruin to hit the Godless Shrine on Duke's side. Now, Fabiano still knew the top card of his deck. Likely mostly interested in shuffling that one away, the card that was brainstormed away by the Jace.
Yeah, not only shuffling that away, but also knocking Reid off of white mana. These two, if I'm not mistaken, actually rode here together for this tournament. There's a very good chance they know each of their lists by heart.
Yeah, and Duke on 2 forests, 2 swamps, no basic plane, is just very lightly white in this Abzan deck.
Yeah, and I think that's not a bad spot to be. You don't want to deal yourself too much damage. My only concern is that when you start playing against decks like Jeskai Control or Azorius Control, where they have a bunch of Fields of Ruin, Ghost Quarters, and things of that nature, knocking you off of white mana is not that difficult.
Serum Visions, after all that for Fabiano, now that the deck has been reset by that Field of Ruin. Draw and scry 2.
Yeah, Gerard here really sequencing well, putting the cards back in the correct order via Jason Mind Sculptor so that he can shuffle away a dead one with a Field of Ruin, choosing that safer line of Jason Mind Sculptor Brainstorm instead of the more aggressive tick up kind of ensures that he's able to terminus on the following turn. I really like how he's been playing this game and really putting Reid to the test.
Kept 2 on top of that Serum Visions. Duke on tapping with 3 lands and Liliana at 4. Liliana can be good if Duke can maintain that for a couple turns, though I don't know how I feel about my chances with Fabiano leaving 2 on top.
Yeah, it's pretty dangerous, but the plus from Liliana forces both players to discard. Reid actually gets to unlock that Lingering Souls and play it for only 2 mana, even though he doesn't have access to white.
Yep, flashback Lingering Souls. Fabiano just discards a land. Couple Jading Clomperrin Spirit tokens.
Let's take a look at that token, if we can get that on screen, Mr. Director, because it's a good one. Jading Clomperrin is, of course, part of the personality collection here from Star City Games, which we have talked about before. But Jadine, notoriously a Jund player at heart. She is the spirit of Bloodbraid Elf being destroyed by Valakut the Molten Pinnacle.
It's like Fabiano, no 5th land, so kept some spells on top. Just passing back to Duke. Liliana now on 5 when we start.
All right, well, it's about to tick up to 6, and that's the part where things become scary. If Gerard has Snapcaster Mage to maybe apply pressure, that's good for him. If he doesn't have a Snapcaster Mage to apply pressure, or if Reid has an Abrupt Decay or something like that to keep it from taking damage, that's really good for Reid. Gerard has basically 1 more turn to find an answer to that Liliana, or he's threatening to lose half of his permanents.
Duke will start with an attack with the 2 Spirit tokens. That comes across. Fabiano falls to 10. Plus Liliana up to 6. Duke discards Twilight Mire. Fabiano discards Search for Escanta, I believe. Relic is activated. Mire exiled from the graveyard. End step. Fabiano will use Cryptic Command to return that Liliana to Duke's hand and draw a card.
It's a good temporary answer to the problem. As long as Liliana doesn't ultimate, the discards over time don't affect the Azorius control deck that much. You have a bit of redundancy with what your cards do, and you have a reasonable amount of card advantage so that as long as the Absent deck is also discarding and staying at parity as far as card advantage is concerned, I think you're okay.
Fabiano just spends his turn activating Relic, no land. Duke will attack with those 2 spirits, Fabiano at 8. Post-combat, here's that Liliana the Veil again. On the way down this time, Fabiano will counter and draw with Cryptic Command. Yeah,
that has to be a really frustrating sequence for Reid there. Putting that Liliana almost at ultimate and then just having it bounced via first Cryptic Command as the last card in Gerard's hand, and that followed up with another Cryptic Command to counter draw, and then following that up with a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That's the power of all your cards saying draw a card attached to them.
Yes, things really snowball in a big way, and the Abzan, the Jund deck, you really want to get ahead early, and Duke did a fine job of pressuring Fabiano's life total, but now Fabiano's got a Planeswalker at 5, just untapped a couple lands, and all Duke has is a couple Spirit tokens.
Yeah, and you can really see the frustration on his face. He knows that he is up against the wall now, whereas 2 turns ago, it looked like he was prime position to actually just straight up win this game.
And the Spirit tokens, they're a little bit anemic as far as dealing with the Teferi. He does still have that Maelstrom Pulse in hand that we revealed with the Dark Confidant. He'll fire that as the Teferi. Fabiano will respond by exiling the graveyards and the Relic of Progenitus, though this might just be good.
Yeah, he does have 1 copy of Spell Pierce that he was trying to draw to. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of answers. What I don't love is playing to that 1 of out actually might end up costing him by putting leaving a Planeswalker in the graveyard as well as that Maelstrom Pulse, whereas he could have waited and then any future Tarmogoyf was very neutered as far as strength.
Yeah, Pulse is good. Teferi down. Spirit tokens knock Fabiano to 6. Fabiano's turn is just a Celestial Colonnade and pass back.
There's definitely an argument to be made about playing to that 1 of. I don't think that Gerard is in a great spot now just because that Maelstrom Pulse went unanswered. And if he drew the Spell Pierce in that spot, the game probably ended right then and there.
Duke will attack again with the Spirits. Here's Vendilion Click flashed in as a blocker. Not really the ideal matchup for Vendilion Click, but here it is. We'll get a look at the hand. Marsh Flats, Fatal Push, and is that Tireless Tracker at the top? Not anymore. That's going to the bottom of the deck.
Yeah, I don't mind that one.
And Duke did have Fetchland Fatal Push in hand. Had to trade a Spirit token with that Vendilion Click, though. The exchange is kind of fine either way. With Fabiano being at such a low life total, though, maybe wanted to do that. Spirit token does trade Fabiano to 5.
Reid here looks like he drew a discard spell. He's going to fire this off. Gerard low.
Inquisition. Fabiano responds with Path to Exile on the other Spirit token. There is one basic left for Duke, the second Forest.
My guess is the other card in Gerard's hand does not get affected by the Inquisition of Kozilek. Otherwise, I don't think he would have cast it there on that Spirit.
Yep, it's a Field of Ruin. So not hit by Inquisition, but also not really anything of consequence.
Yeah, that Vendilion Click mid-combat there. Reid trying to play a little safe, basically trying to force the action during the attack step via, whatever it is, whether it's Cryptic Command or Snapcaster Removal Spell or whatever. He's basically just putting Gerard to the test, and what ended up happening was he was cost a Tireless Tracker straight up, and then also didn't have the ability to take care of the Vendilion Click with the Fatal Push and Revolt off the Fetchland pre-blocks.
Fabiano will play that Field of Ruin. He'll take care of that Overgrown Tomb. That's kind of a Wasteland effect. Fabiano does get to find Basic Island. No basics left for Duke, so just 2 forests and 2 swamps.
There's
one card left over for Fabiano.
There's a lot to be said about a deck that plays 4 Path to Exile, 4 Field of Ruin, and a modern format where people really limit themselves to roughly 4 basic lands max unless they are a mostly one-color deck. You don't see too many decks in the format playing more than 5 basic lands, and over time, if you draw 2 Field of Ruin, 3 Path to Exile, it's going to start being Swords of Plowshares where they don't gain life, or it's going to start being Strip Mine where you still get to get a land. It's insanely powerful.
Duke picked up a Dark Confidant, played that in Marsh Flats for turn. That's going to force some action. Back on Fabiano, he drew, played, and immediately exiled Relic of Progenitus, and rewarded, picks up Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, that Relic of Progenitus, you're really seeing why it's in the deck. Early on, it really stifled the development of Reid and his graveyard-based synergies. But now, later in the game, when the graveyard is not a huge issue, just cycling it for 2 mana really becomes evident why it's there.
And he's going to go ahead and Brainstorm. He'll let Duke get at least 1 Dark Confidant activation here, unless he can find a Path to Exile. Ooh, Oust.
Oust.
That's maybe even a little bit better than having a path here. Put that 1 second from the top, and Duke gains 3 life. He'll go to 17.
Yeah, and at this juncture, that draw step is even effectively a dead card against an active Jace the Mind Sculptor. I would bet a reasonable amount here that Reid wants to use this Marsh Flats during the end step because he needs something better than Dark Confidant next turn to even have a shot in this game.
And no action on the following turn for Duke, and back on Fabiano's side, he'll start with the Brainstorm. There's another Field of Ruin. Currently, Duke just has an untapped Marsh Flats for non-basics. And there's Teferi Hero Dominario, and Duke's seen enough. We're going to game number 2.
Yeah, he knows the limitations of his deck. 1 Planewalker is already pretty tough to beat. 2, almost impossible. He doesn't have any reach like Kolaghan's Command, Lightning Bolt, since he has Absent Colors instead of Jund. So, no real outs there. Decides to pack it in, save some time, knowing that time is a factor in this matchup.
All right, so for the sideboards, Reid Duke maybe needs a little bit of help against this blue card advantage deck. His sideboard is 4 Stony Silence, 3 Fulminator Mage, 2 Collective Brutality, 2 Path to Exile, 2 Nihil Spellbomb, a Grafdigger's Cage, and a Choke. There are a couple things to like here. What would you say you'd do?
I think Choke definitely comes in. Any deck that has Island, it's a no-brainer. And the fact that cards like Steam Vents and Hallowed Fountain are islands means it's turbo-powered in this modern format against these blue decks. I like Nihil Spellbomb to an extent, but in Gerard's particular build, it's not as good. I've seen the way he sideboards earlier. I saw him board in Fulminator Mage and Collective Brutality, so I expect to see those as well.
Over on Fabiano's side, his sideboard, 2 copies of Porphyry Nodes. You don't always see that one. It is quite powerful when it works, though. 2 Dispels, 2 Surgical Extraction, another Vendilion Click, another Timely Reinforcements, 3 copies of Ceremonious Rejection, 2 Threads of Disloyalty. That's probably pretty good here. A Baneslayer Angel and a Lyra Dawnbringer. What do you like here?
So Threads of Disloyalty, I think, is the go-to. Reid's version of Abzan is chock full of really powerful 2-drops. I expect that to be a really important sideboard card in this matchup specifically. Ceremonious Rejection doesn't matter. Baneslayer Angel, Lyra Dawnbringer, not really ideal in this particular matchup. But with Reid probably boarding out some number of his removal spells that can kill it, there's a chance that those actually end up being pretty huge threats. You know, taking a look at the deck list, actually, you know, there is a pretty huge emphasis from Reid on Fatal Push, and he has 1 copy of Assassin's Trophy, 2 copies of Maelstrom Pulse that can actually take care of these giant flying angels. And other than that, his removal is Abrupt Decay and Liliana of the Veil, neither of which are particularly great answers to those cards. But I don't know. I don't think that Gerard will bring them in, but if he did and they were great, I would not be surprised. Vendilion Click looks kind of bad against Lingering Souls, but if he knows Reid's list, he knows there's only 2, and it's not that bad. And if he's able to main phase it at some point and steal a Lingering Souls from Reid's hand, that's also pretty good, since Reid's going to be basically sitting on his hands until he hits 5 mana for the Lingering Souls so that they don't get sniped by the Relic of Progenitus.
One way or the other, though, probably going to be a slog. Saw game 1 there, took 20 minutes. Abzan versus Azorius Control, not one of the faster affairs in the modern format. Reid will be on the play here, having lost the first game. Players looking at their opening 7s.
It looks like we had a sneep from Reid Duke and a mulligan from Gerard.
He's doing a show read. You keep this?
Yeah, do you keep this one?
Nah.
Nah, dog.
Send that one back.
No. It straight up loses to my Dark Confidant or Liliana of the Veil. These 2 obviously great friends.
Here at Star City Games, we're a big fan of animals. We love talking about creatures and puns. Our creature collection this month, we're doing, oh yeah,
Hadouken!
Classic Street Fighter reference here. See the powerful cat. You can get your own Hadouken sleeves and playmat available for sale, as well as player bundles at go.starcitygames.com/creature collection. All throughout the month of January, you can check out Hadouken. You're so good at that.
What about February?
Well, we'll talk about February when it's February, all right? Don't get ahead of yourself.
Wow. Wow.
It's Hadouken month.
It's Yeti Steady Go. I remember it from earlier. See? I'm a company man.
You stick around for February, you'll be able to get that Yeti Steady Go map. Fabiano is going to keep on 6. I think we was a scry to the top. Duke starts with a Treetop Village. Fabiano starts with a Celestial Colonnade, just trading creature lands to start.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty interesting to see one player lead with the old school Treetop Village, and then I don't want to say new school Celestial Colonnade because at this point it's like, what, 10 years old or so?
Right.
But, you know, just basically Treetop Village standing the test of time. Creature lands are here to stay and hopefully here for quite a bit longer.
Overgrown Tomb untapped, knocks Duke to 18. Grimflayer again, the second turn for him. Fabiano just a Scalding Tarn, he'll pass back. Pre-combat, Verdant Catacombs for Duke, and Fabiano not interested in taking the damage. He's going to Path to Exile on the Grimflayer.
Yeah, plus Gerard understands that every time this Grimflayer connects, it's giving Reid access to a better draw step on the next turn, as well as pushing him towards graveyard synergies like Lingering Souls or pumping his creatures like Tarmogoyf.
Speaking of Lingering Souls, this Path to Exile is only going to be able to find Duke a forest or a swamp. No basic plains. Pretty light on white cards this weekend. His basic swamp is found. And he'll crack the Verdant Catacombs while he's in the deck, going to 17. We'll see if it's 16. Maybe he does want to get white mana online.
Yeah, oddly enough, Reid actually has access to 2 copies of Shambling Vent. That's the black-white version of Celestial Colonnade. Basically, it's a 2/3 with lifelink. Saw a lot of standard play. I myself played it quite a bit in Jeskai Black. It was quite good. But I think it's important to note that it is occasionally difficult for him to turn on the white ability from the Shambling Vent, and more so it just acts like an additional white source that sometimes can turn into a creature land.
Godless Shrine was found for Duke. It's at 15, and Lingering Souls was cast for Fabiano. Just Field a Rune added. He left that Scalding Tarn uncracked. And we're back to Duke.
I'm quite interested here. Gerard holding up the Field of Ruin to protect from that Treetop Village attack. But it looks like Gerard had access to Detention Sphere, which he could have used to take care of the tokens, but not a lot else.
Speaking of Detention Sphere, Duke's going to start with Inquisition of Kozilek. That's going to hit the bin. Cryptic Command and a couple lands, the leftovers, I do believe. Duke has some options. Could potentially, if fired out the Cheat That Village, he'll pass on that. Just an attack with the Spirits, knock Fabiano to 18. Fabiano will crack that Scalding Tarn down to 17. Fire off Field of Ruin on that Treetop Village. Suppose that makes sense why you don't want to attack with that one.
Yeah, and Gerard is doing this in combat so that he doesn't give Reid access to an extra mana source. Reid, pretty sure is going to be flashing back that Lingering Souls, but if he has a better play from hand here, he might just lean on that. Something like Liliana of the Veil would be particularly powerful to get in right now underneath that Cryptic Command. So I'm curious to see what Reid has this turn.
Ooh.
That's a nice
choke.
One. That's a nice one.
Choke from 8th edition. Sorry about that whammy. That's a Stone Rain on that island. And any islands that are produced from Fabiano in following turns, he's only going to have one use of those until he can do something about this powerful enchantment that says islands do not untap during their controller's untap steps.
Yeah, this is the kind of modern Magic that I like. These big, swingy sideboard cards that completely shift games in one player's favor. Even though right now it only looks like a Stone Rain, if Gerard doesn't put an emphasis on clearing it from the battlefield, he has to fetch Hallowed Fountains untapped, or else they just stay tapped. And every time he uses an island, it is permanently used. So you see here, he's fetching up a Plains as opposed to a blue source, which means that Cryptic Command is not being cast anytime soon.
Yeah. Duke will connect with the 2 spirits he already had. That combined with that fetch land, Fabiano to 14, and Duke will flash back that Lingering Souls. 4 spirits online, and what a draw spec for Fabiano.
No
Miracles
kidding.
Terminus. There goes those spirits.
That's why you play. That's why you play straight Azorius Control, and you don't splash Lightning Bolt and Electrolyze and that garbage. You want to play Terminus.
No follow-up for Duke. Just back to Fabiano. That Celestial Colonnade, those 2 planes, he's free to use those every turn of the game. Though that basic island, it's under some duress from that choke, and here he's going to shock for a Hallowed Fountain because that's the only way you get that mana. He's at 12.
Yeah, he has that Cryptic Command at the ready. He's going to go for a bounce on choke and draw a card. Hopefully look for a way to counterspell it on the way back down. But at the very least, he gets a cycle, give himself 1 turn of reprieve, cast something like Jason Mind Sculptor, and since he has that Celestial Colonnade, only has to put up 1 island as a vulnerable card.
And here is Jace the Mind Sculptor. He's going to Brainstorm. There's nothing going on in the battlefield that's pressuring that in any way.
Hilariously enough, the Azorius Control deck actually has a built-in preventative measure against the choke with things like Glacial Fortress and Celestial Colonnade. And now, Celestial Colonnade is played because it's a great win condition. Glacial Fortress is played because it's a good dual land that doesn't deal you damage. And once you have something like Hallowed Fountain or a basic island or plains on the battlefield, it's just an untapped Tundra that doesn't count as an island. And importantly in this spot, not counting as an island is a big deal.
Yeah, no kidding. Duke will recommit that choke. That resolves. Here's Dark Confidant and Tarmogoyf for the turn.
Yeah, but it feels like the damage is already done. That choke only locking down 1 island at the moment. That Terminus put back on top via the Jace Brainstorm ability. And now the Brainstorm again from the Jason Mind Sculptor just pushes Gerard further and further out of reach.
Yeah. It almost feels like we're playing Legacy here as Fabiano is just going to be brainstorming every turn of the game. Here's a tap of 5. He'll set aside that island that won't untap. And Baneslayer Angel to join the Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, Reduke here needs some way to clear off both of these major threats from Gerard. The lifelinking 5/5 flying first striking Baneslayer Angel, so iconic for Magic the Gathering circa 2011, 2012, that era. It's a really strong one to see out here.
That card was so brutal when it first hit Standard.
Oh, absolutely. I think it debuted in 2009 and made some big waves.
It's going to catch Pat to exile, much like it did in that Standard format sometimes. Fabiano's going to let that one go, find a basic land. It's going to be an island, even though they don't untap. Just 2 copies of Plains in the deck. He's out of those.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters too much at this point. You know, Gerard basically just brainstorming with Jace and, you know, just looking for some way to physically close the game out. But this game is effectively over.
Yeah, there was another brainstorm. Looks like he has a Threads of Disloyalty among the holdings. Pretty easy for him to check basically everything that Duke's deck does.
Duke's deck does.
I'm a big fan of alliteration. Vendilion Click on the draw step for Fabiano against Duke.
You know, my job is to, like, write articles, right? I too enjoy
I assume
alliteration.
you also are. I like to just plant it. Duke's going to respond to the Vendilion Click trigger with Abrupt Decay, show Fabiano that his hand is just 2 fetch lands, play the Marsh Flats for turn. And not interested in conceding because Fabiano is up a game, but the writing's on the wall here. Fabiano in a commanding position.
Yeah, in this particular scenario, this would be one of the best comebacks of all time. If Gerard doesn't have access to a counterspell in hand, Reid actually has the ability to draw something like Maelstrom Pulse here to take care of the Jace, and then it could just be a handful of removal spells versus Reid. So I don't think that this game is particularly close, and I don't think that Reid can possibly win. But if he did, it would start by killing the Jace.
Yeah. Reid not going to concede, though. Fabiano is going to force a win a little bit faster, as here is Lyra Dawnbringer, the sort of second copy of Baneslayer Angel. Well, there's another path to exile.
Yeah, I mean, Reid keeps finding the answer to the actual win conditions, but is not finding answers to the Jace the Mind Sculptor, which is the card that is really bearing him. There it is, Maelstrom Pulse for Reid Duke.
He's a fighter.
Is this it? Is this the start of the comeback?
Jace the Mind Sculptor down. Fabiano does still have Celestial Colonnade. He did fire off a few brainstorms, so
right, but it takes a while.
Yeah, it takes some doing.
It takes a while to kill with the Colonnade from 15 life. That's 4 total attacks, and at any point, Reid could draw some way to remove it and keep himself in this game.
Fabiano just going to pass, fires off another Vendilion Click. Tarmogoyf fetch land. Do you want to take the Tarmogoyf? He doesn't. Duke will cast that. Fabiano's been hanging out with that Threads of Disloyalty, though.
Yeah, and Reid has gone through an Abrupt Decay, a Maelstrom Pulse, and quite a few ways to actually clear that Tarmogoyf. So this Threads of Disloyalty is going to play a very nice Baneslayer Angel effect from the other side.
Click knocks Duke to 12. There's
Missed
Threads, and there's the handshake.
I am a huge fan of Threads of Disloyalty, so I always love a good stolen Tarmogoyf. Gerard takes that one in convincing fashion, was ahead for about 7 turns or so. Reid doing his best to fight back, just couldn't squeak it out.
Yeah, Gerard Fabiano, 2